All of our files are free and will remain free. If you like the show, you can show support by donating $1 to help with expenses. Just use the PayPal link on our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page. Thanks.
Welcome back to part 2 of the forum. Today we're talking with Tim Swartz about the classified space program or space fleet. And we have already made some scenarios for how this developed, how early it was in the hands of our civilization, and possibly early breakouts. Now we come to the war, and then of course the UFO sightings explode post-war. Why do you suppose this is? We get a new fad.
Right. Well, you have the speculation that the crash at Roswell, that if whatever it was that crashed at Roswell was an extraterrestrial spacecraft, that we were able to back engineer material and technology from that aircraft.
But there were already flying saucers before Roswell.
Exactly, exactly. And see, and that myself, I've never been convinced that the craft that crashed at Roswell was extraterrestrial. I mean, I wonder if we weren't surprised by a Nazi aircraft, and that the United States was taken very much by surprise. That here we thought the war was over, and all of a sudden here is a very advanced aircraft crashing at a very, very sensitive area in the United States. I mean, there's the only place in the United States that held atomic weapons, and you have this high technology aircraft crashing there. And so I think that at that point on, we really start to see a gosh, what would you call it? Like a hyper reaction. I mean, it's just like everything just went into hyperdrive.
Yeah, CIA suddenly founded.
Right.
But how surprised were we really, considering what happened a little before Roswell, this expedition we sent to Antarctica?
Well, obviously the Project High Jump expedition to Antarctica was not just a scientific expedition.
No, we covered that expedition in depth, but could you relate it somehow to the Roswell incident?
Oh, sure, sure. Well, see, I don't think it's a coincidence that shortly after Project High Jump ended, and it ended early, as you talked about previously, that then just a few months later, all of a sudden you start seeing unusual aircraft flying around in our airspace,
Right.
especially when Admiral Byrd had warned Congress that the polar regions was someplace that we had to watch closely, because his fear was that enemy aircraft could attack the United States from the north and south polar regions. Well, then just a few months later, all of a sudden, you start seeing aircraft flying around over the United States and in other places in the world that obviously are not ours.
Right.
So I think that there is probably a connection there. That whoever it is, I mean, people, naturally, I mean, there could have been a secret Nazi base, probably a small one, in Antarctica, with more activity going on in South America as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that once the United States was aware that all of this was going on, then you start seeing, flying saucers, flying discs, flying like triangles and
cigars,
things like that over our airspace. It's so. I mean, I think that we were given a warning that hey, you're not number one on this planet.
Yeah. Speaking of that, you know Ed Grimsley, and now I think Stephen Greer and many actually are into these night vision goggles, especially second and third generation. You're probably aware of all the millions of UFOs that pops up when you use those.
Right.
And then you have the so-called NASA UFOs, several NASA recordings that's out there, like the Tether incident. And also there you see like a million unidentified flying objects, looks like plasma, often orbs. And obviously it's a question of frequency here, because when we already know enough, especially actually the science around the end of the 19th century, Tesla's time, and until the Second World War, was groundbreaking in the area of vibration, frequencies, and all that. But then it gets completely downplayed after the war. Probably it all goes black. But what we know is that all our senses are actually vibration related, and they are at particular frequencies. So when we see a UFO suddenly appearing and suddenly disappearing, it's not always a question of them leaving so quick that we can't see it. It's more of a question of changing frequencies, so they manifest within our range of vision and then they disappear from our range of vision. But when you use technology that can extend our perception, as for instance the visionary perception, then suddenly we see them, and how many there are there. And then the question begs itself, could all this, first of all, is all this technological? It could be many other things. It could be organic, spiritual, plasma, but also are all of these ours? So, there's a lot to cover here, but what's your thoughts about that?
Well, when it comes to the UFO phenomena, I kind of think that it's a little from column A and a little from column B. I do think that probably that the Earth is being visited by beings from other worlds, other dimensions. It's really hard to say, because I think that saying that they're strictly from other planets is being simplistic. I mean, I think the universe is such a huge and unknown place that what we are seeing, that we may perceive as beings from other planets, may actually just be so far outside of our knowledge base that it's just really an unknown. I think that we are being visited by beings that are not from our world. I think that some are, quite a few are actually man-made craft, like we had talked about before, that have been developed over the decades using Earth-based technologies, but of a lot more advanced than most of us are aware of. I think that some may actually also be uh, time machines, what we would refer to as time machines. I've often said that what better way, if you have a technology that you could go into the past and visit a civilization, what better way to disguise yourself than, because from looking back in history that, well, people were saying that they saw, like UFOs, and that the beings who came out of it said that they came from other planets. Well, let's go back there and we'll just play that role. What better way to disguise yourself then? Because, a lot of these cases of people who have claimed to have had contacts with UFO occupants, the UFO occupants are awfully knowledgeable about the people that they run into, about where they live, where they're going to live, what's going to happen to them in the future, like friends and family who are going to die, things like, and they've even been told, like months and years and stuff like that. Now, how would an extraterrestrial being from another planet know that, or why would they even care?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, so I think that we are looking at a number of different things that resemble each other, but may not exactly be the same. So I know that's kind of a almost a coward's way of getting out of it. But see, I think that if you go and pigeonhole yourself too much into one belief system, then when you have contrary evidence, you're not going to be willing to look at that contrary evidence because you're so indebted to this one major belief system.
Right. But we do have corroborating evidence for the most down-to-earth explanation, which we have. I remember when we had Dolan on not too long ago, we were talking about Gary McKinnon, and as you know, he experienced something, which there may be a question of interpretation as for the non-terrestrial, but just the fact that it's in our records as part of our fleet just proves that this is a breakaway within our own, with ties to our public agencies and departments. So would you say a few words about this?
Well, yeah, and you have to remember that Gary McKinnon. He was not looking for anything having to do with a classified secret space program. He was looking for UFOs. He was looking for proof that the United States had evidence that UFOs were extraterrestrial. So, his dog wasn't in that fight. No. So when he came across information that showed that the United States had a U.S. Space Command and with lists of non-terrestrial officers' names and records of fleet-to-fleet transfers containing names of ships that he could never find as U.S. Navy ships.
Do you remember some of these names?
Oh, not offhand. Okay. Yeah.
You're interested to see if they.
And I don't remember. I don't know if he actually did, because you have to remember that he was using a very rudimentary hacking system.
Yeah.
And which just goes to show you how poorly guarded the United States computers were at that time. I mean, he was able to get into it, and a lot of what he was able to do. I mean, he just eyeballed it. So, and I'm probably just repeating like Star Trek names, but it was like,
Yeah, my bet is on mythological names. That would fit the profile, wouldn't it?
Ticonderoga and, things like that, Okay. So, I mean, here you had a guy, I mean, he was looking for proof of extraterrestrials and found this instead. And so if this was a guy who's just making up a story, why would he make up a story about something that he wasn't looking for?
Right.
Why didn't he just say, "Hey, I found proof that the aliens are here and that they have the U.S. military flying around in their spaceships"? No, I mean, he found nothing about that, and he admitted it. But instead, he's like, "Hey, obviously there's some kind of a secret space program going on that has nothing to do with extraterrestrials."
Did he go to the NASA archives too, or only the Defense Department, or do you remember what he hacked?
Let's see. I know he's hacking into U.S. government military computer networks. He tried to get into NASA. I don't think. Actually, what happened was that as he was hacking these systems, I mean, it was so rudimentary that the monitors at NASA and the Air Force were showing, like him controlling the cursor back and forth. That's how he got caught. Someone was like, "Hey, I'm not moving this," But actually, I don't think he managed to get into NASA. And and I may be wrong on this. I think NASA may have actually had done a better job at keeping their computers hacker free, but it was
But we have other people who has testified what's going on in NASA.
Yes, yeah. And again,
I'm talking about the censorship and stuff.
Well, with NASA, NASA has always been always kind of wimpy when it comes to their space exploration programs, because I mean we all know that the reason that humanity is exploring space is the idea that, well, there's probably somebody else up there, and we want to meet up with them. NASA kind of like does the old duck and dodge with that, and they are loath to admit that hopefully that someday we're going to find another intelligent race out there.
It's as if they don't want to admit this.
That is one of the odd things that a lot of us it's always mystified us about NASA, because you would think if they did actually discover that there was other life out there, that boy, I mean, the governments would then be willing to pour money into their budget. I mean, NASA, has had trouble for years
Yeah.
getting money to support their space programs. And in my opinion, and a lot of other people as well, what better way to get money into your budgets than to say, hey, we found there's another planet out there, let's go visit them. But instead it seems to be just the opposite. Anytime that any kind of evidence seems to come out, say like on like Mars, there has been a number of really interesting finds on Mars.
And they don't want to explore it.
Exactly. They found meteorites that have come from Mars, blasted off the surface of Mars, and they're found like in Antarctic that seems to show fossilized microbes. And NASA just doesn't want to touch that. We have people who have worked for NASA during the early days when we set up like the Voyager probes to land on the surface of the moon before the Apollo space program. We had these robotic craft that landed on the surface of the moon, took pictures, sent them back to Earth, in orbit around the moon in order to find good places for the Apollo missions to land. A lot of these pictures, according to some of these reconnaissance experts who directly dealt with the material as they came back to Earth, said that it appeared that there were domes and other intelligently built structures on the moon that NASA was taking pictures of, and it was their job to basically airbrush them out. If they couldn't airbrush them out, those photographs had to be destroyed.
Yeah.
We've had a number of different people from different aspects of these missions who have claimed the same thing. And I mean, there's a lot of very good people who have done some excellent research on the photographs that have made it. I don't know if maybe they just weren't noticed, who have found unusual looking structures, on the surface of Mars. But again, NASA
and the moon.
Well, Mars as well. But I was referring to the moon. Thank you. But you have like a Robert Morningstar who has done some really excellent research on pictures that they're in the NASA archives and can be found if you have the like the correct serial numbers for them. And but NASA does not want to admit that these could be intelligent structures.
Yeah, anyone can verify it, and other people worth mentioning when it comes to proving this censorship, this manipulation of evidence is like Joseph Skipper. He has some wonderful Mars pictures in his database. It's out there, people can check. Richard Hoagland is known for have brought pictures to the public, John Lear. But it's true, what you say. For those who don't know it, there are people who have worked for NASA who's out there, who's on the record. There's testimony that, yes, my job was to airbrush. But we don't even need a word for it, because when you see some of these pictures brought out there, the early airbrushing was so primitive that now in the days of Photoshop and everything, everybody who sees these pictures can see that it's smudged out. So it's a problem for them. Now they probably have very sophisticated methods. But those that are out there are so obviously manipulated that it's embarrassing.
Right.
It's almost as if they want us to know.
I really wonder anymore if NASA and these other agencies really even bother anymore to try to hide these photographs, because I think that the giggle factor has become so predominant with a lot of this stuff that even if you have something that very clearly looks like a bridge or an old building
or a statue
in a crater, right, and then somebody says, hey, look at this looks unusual, and people are like, oh, Oh yeah, right. You're seeing little men from Mars on the moon,
Yeah.
and see, and that has been something that has been brought into play for years now when it comes
Right.
to all of this stuff is the giggle factor.
Mm.
I mean, you could have a picture that is just absolutely fantastic, but if you go as far as to say, hey, this could be an extraterrestrial structure on the moon, then you're just, oh well, you're a nut job.
Mm-hmm.
I
But
don't care what it looks like. You're saying that it's extraterrestrials. You're crazy.
mm-hmm. Yeah, but let's take a better argument that the so-called debunkers or the skeptics may have, and that is why do we need them to throw all this money after NASA? What usage possibly could there be of a civilian space program?
Well, the very beginning of the civilian space program had its roots in the military. And I'm sad to say, and it's still very much that way. The whole the beginning of, say, like the Gemini and the Apollo programs came from the military's research into missiles in order to carry atomic and hydrogen warheads
Mm.
to enemy countries. And so then later this was then used in NASA for the so-called civilian space programs.
Mm.
And I think that there was this promise that if we allow scientists to, say, study the moon, for scientific reasons, that there's going to have to be something that would be profitable for the military involved as well. The whole development of the Apollo space program was also part of a secret military program to establish a military base on the moon
Mm.
in order to have a positioning system that we could shoot at Russia or the Soviet Union.
It was a part of the Star Wars program.
No, this actually was something that was first considered in the late 1950s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. See, the Air Force very much, or the military, it wasn't just the Air Force, but the military wanted to have bases on the moon, so that they could have. And this was, you have to remember, this was the days before we had satellite technology as advanced as we do now.
Mm.
I mean, there are probably already atomic like platforms in orbit, secret platforms that are armed with missiles and what have you, that could shoot a missile down anywhere on the planet in a certain amount of time.
And probably upwards too.
Oh yes, 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 definitely. But in the 1950s and 60s, the best way that they could think about doing this was to establish a base on the moon and then shoot at the Earth from the moon. And so the whole Apollo space program was a kind of a conglomeration of the military and the civilian sciences, just kind of, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, I think that by the time the Apollo space mission, moon missions ended, because they still had at least two more, I think, on schedule to go before Richard Nixon canceled them. But I
Mm.
think at that point it was realized that for military purposes, that the moon, that they had better ideas. The military had better ideas of what to do. So, I think then the interest in the moon was lost, and that was one of the reasons why the civilian space programs to the moon was canceled. Without that military money coming in, the Congress wasn't going to give you enough, and so they had to stop it.
Mm. And now they're privatizing the NASA task, so to speak.
Well, and once again, it's because the military space program has gone way past NASA at this point.
Mm.
The Air Force has its own. They have their own rockets, and I'll put quotation marks around that. But the United States Air Force and military have their own space fleet. And
Right.
this is what we've been talking about all of this time. I mean, they have their own space fleet in cahoots to a certain extent with this breakaway civilization. But again, I mean, this is if you would go and ask an Air Force general who may have knowledge of the military space fleet about a breakaway civilization and their spacecraft, he'd look at you like you're crazy. You know,
Yeah.
this is extremely compartmentalized information.
Yeah.
You know, not every general or soldier knows about this stuff.
Mm.
Only the top ranking, the elite of the elite, the people who are in this for life
Mm.
know about this. You can't just go and just let every general know about this kind of stuff because when he retires, he could blab.
Mm.
And their family, I mean,
And many have, many have.
yes, and some have, but they haven't been given all of the information, which is why when they do blab, we get such a diverse range of stories.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
get the one
Yeah, like Philip Corso.
Corso, I think was legitimate, but
He hinted to at least a lot of things. There
right.
are some theories that that there's a mix, that there's some disinformation and some truth
Right.
in Corso's book.
Well, see, Corso, people were like, oh, well, he was just doing it because he never rose to the ranks that he thought he should in the military, and that, he was just wanting one last hurrah and to make some money at the end.
Well, more psychological plausible would be then that okay, I'm not promoted. Well, look at me spill the beans.
Right.
But I'm
Right.
keeping, of course, some of it within the official narrative of ET.
But if anybody who knows anything about all of this, you don't get rich talking about UFOs.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
know,
Mm.
you're not going to make
On the
any.
contrary, you lose your job and
Ex-
your credibility.
exactly, and that's what happened to Corso.
Mm,
That's what happened
mm,
to Corso. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, I mean, was very well thought of by his peers.
mm.
But once he came out with this information, then they were just like, oh, well, this guy is nuts. But I mean, shortly before he put this book out, nobody thought that.
Yeah.
So simply because he wrote about something that happened in his past, that I mean, and he was pretty straightforward about how he wrote it.
Yeah, and researchers like Dr. Farrell and others, they found, I don't know what you should call it, discrepancies and paradoxes, which, if you tell a story out of your belief system, irregardless of how genuine or how authentic it is compared to the truth, at least people who do it have some kind of internal coherent belief or conviction about it. So
Hmm.
you wouldn't deliberate put up out apparent internal self-contradiction. You would try to your logic avoids that. So often when that is done, it is because to bring our attention to the fact that something is claimed here.
Right.
But this is okay. We're going into a little conspiracy version of it here, but you know what I mean. So a big question here is, what factions do you imagine we have in the global geopolitical or exopolitical scene today? Because there is, what we talked about so far are different developments, that some co-emerge, some are antagonistic. So what do you imagine are the players on the scene today? Behind the scene, rather.
Behind the players behind the scene, well, it is. I think that there are probably at least two different factions, as you referred to it, of this breakaway civilization.
Mhm.
But maybe like a Western and Eastern type of situations.
Yeah, I think the Russians have their own black projects. They have to have.
But I think that there is also collaboration going on because
Mm.
it's like I said before, the real movers and shakers are the people with the money,
Mm.
the rich elites who have been the real movers of our society for a millennia, and I think that they possibly are controlling both of these separate factors with their own, trying to think what the proper word would be, just like with their own embrace, I guess would be the word, because and the two separate factors, like you said, like maybe the Western world and the Eastern world may not even realize that they are being played against each other by the third overarching factor that controls everything.
Yeah, but what about the post-Nazi current? We have uncovered and are still in the process of uncovering in these areas that a substantial faction of the most ideological Nazis did survive, and they did engage on the globe economically and in criminal enterprises, cartels, mafias, drugs, terrorism, and corporations notwithstanding. So, there are obviously different factions here, even if there's an hypothetical upper echelon that somehow collects all this together, which of course is an open question. But don't you see more than two factions?
I really don't. I don't think that there is that much space for more than just a couple. I really don't. If we did see more than that, I think that we would see a lot more open conflict. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but we do see a lot of weird open conflict on the world.
Yeah, but see, I think a lot of that open conflict is specifically engineered to make money.
Yeah, of course, but it's also by proxy, isn't it? Because people are dying at the top. Saddam Hussein. Now he's a friend. Now he's not. As an example, you see it in Syria. You see it in Libya. And behind the scenes, there are geopolitical interests.
Right.
And this is classical. You have the Zionists on the one hand, with their influence. And you have the fascists on the other hand with their influence, and you have then separate states who's managed to hold on to power, like the Russians, who are obviously independent to a certain degree here. So I don't know. I'm just throwing out these observations here. See how your take on it.
Well, and I think that again, these are all just basically kind of like bit players or pawns to the real controlling factors that circumnavigate, or not circumnavigate, but I mean they go beyond national borders and and things like that. And these countries, you talked about Saddam Hussein and people like that. I mean they have no idea who the real.
No, but behind them.
Yeah.
No, but behind every power base on Earth, there are larger powers, and so in his case, he was blessed by Rumsfeld and company at the oil and energy, behind Bush. Now it's the bankers behind Obama. But so what about the crack then? If there's not a real antagonism going on, how do you observe? What sense do you make of, let's say, the economical crack?
Oh well, the economical crack is, it's an economical crack for us, but not for not for those who are all above that.
Yeah, but who stands to gain? I mean,
that's once again though, that's the $6 million question there. If anybody, and I'm sure it's been done, but you need to go and look into the people who profit from these kinds of things. You're always hearing these stories, and I'll use 9/11 as an example. A few days, and I don't know the stock terms or the financial terms for this, but like a few days before 9/11 happened, whatever aircraft company the airliner that was involved, was it United or something like that? Somebody went and bought stock or cut stock short. Again, I don't know the financial terms, but in that airline, and then naturally, then after everything happened, their stock crashed, and then they were able to sell short and make a huge profit of that. And
Right.
you see that time and time again
Yeah.
before crises happened. That maybe a week or so before something happens, somebody goes and again, I can't remember what the term is. It's like
No.
selling it short, but they're able to take advantage of the situation and make money off of it
Right.
as if they knew in advance that something was going to happen. So, I mean,
Mm.
I think there is where we have some really good evidence that there is a very high up controlling power over the entire planet. And I think that's the earmarks to this breakaway civilization.
Right. We are going to have Catherine Austin Fitz on, I hope, for elaborating more on the black budget. But
Mm.
yeah, we have touched upon it already too in these areas. So it's an aspect to the whole story. But I keep getting back here a little to the Nazis. Obviously, they would be manifested differently today, but they're still fascist in their ideology, their worldview. I think they are because listen, if they have this technology already around the war, and you were conceding that they would have been the most advanced at that point,
Hmm.
they would have known how to get away, break away. Because you see, in the beginning, we see them very heavily present in South America.
Right.
But as they have time and time, not only South America, by the way, all over the planet, as different people we have on explains, but as time goes by and culture develops, they remain as players behind the scene, no longer prancing ponies with Hugo Boss riding uniforms, but more like a grey eminence in suits behind the scene, men in black. And so they wouldn't go away. In fact, if they wanted to continue, they would have built better breakaway bases to be completely left alone, notwithstanding that the surviving culture on Earth, the so-called allies, get their own programs up and going and get Raider and all that. So, and suddenly they do disappear from South America. There's no doubt, there's no question that today South America has liberated themselves from this old CIA corporation fascist grip. Country after country are turning extremely radical,
Hmm.
and the geopolitical influence there is lost. So where did they go? Everybody can see that they have disappeared.
Hmm.
And you're not the only one I'm asking this question of, by the way, because it's such a huge question. But on your part, where do you see this go? Because if you only think there's two players, you don't give room for the Nazis, or should I say, the heritage of the Nazis.
Oh well, I think the heritage of the Nazis are have become incorporated into one, if not both of these groups.
Okay.
Definitely, definitely.
Right.
Well, okay. Now, you have to remember. See, the Nazis. Uh, I think that they kind of decided after the end of World War II that, well, I mean, we're not going to be successful taking over the planet by military, so
Mm.
let's continue with our economic processes. And I think that they have continued the Fourth Reich, so to speak, in the way that the world's economy is run today, especially corporatism.
Right.
Don't forget that fascism, its other name is corporatism.
Mm-hmm.
And especially here in the United States, where within the last 20 years, corporations have become really the real power in this country. Forget about the Democrats and the Republicans, it's the corporations. So the United States and other countries, the world, in Europe, where the corporations are also making great, huge, inroads. We are seeing basically a fascist type of government system being implemented all over the planet, and this is because of that Nazi influence from the survivors of World War II from Germany. The people who died in Germany in World War II, we're not talking about the bankers and the rich and the elite. No, it was the soldiers and the common folk and everything like that. Some of the, a lot of the military players,
Mm.
but the real movers and shakers, the real people who financed all of this, they just moved to other countries to continue their process. And so, we see that not only on a local, more visible arena, but also higher up into these breakaway civilizations,
Mm.
which they're using this corporatism to run the country. And I think this is kind of like an ultimate goal for these breakaway civilizations, in order to try to control the planet, is to not control it through military, but to control it through corporations and financing and economics. Now, of course, you're always going to have hot spots, say like the Middle East. The Middle East always seems to be a hot spot, and so this is an area that is always going to be exploited because of this, and then they can use that to create other conflicts, around the planet whenever needed. But again, I think that a lot of this has its roots from Nazi Germany and the people who came out of that, at the end of World War II.
But do you think they have everything has transformed since the war,
Hmm.
and our culture has developed too? But if you look at their old ideals, I mean, some of them were more peculiar with Hitler,
Hmm.
and some of them were probably more time-stamped, the zeitgeist of the time. So that would have got rid of some of the old notions. But how much of the crazy philosophy, obviously in the core of this is an inhumanness and an anti-human and destructive Kali energy, so to speak. But as for stuff like the primitive racism, their anti-Semitism, how much of the, no, we high octane speculation here, but
Sure.
did we are allowed? This is part two. So how would we see that survive? Because then there's a question of how they regard, how they relate to Israel and the Zionism, and Zionism do have there's actually more Christian Zionists than there are Jewish, by the way, but they have influence in America. So then if they keep their anti-Semitism, there should be at least two ideological factions just on that base. But of course they can have corrupted and taken over Israel. But then they obviously do not have this anti-Semitism going on anymore. We know for sure that they have the money and the power hunger as a basic value. That's indisputable, power and money. But
Mhm.
of all these other notions that we associate to Nazism, how much of that do you think have survived?
Mm, I think that, like you were saying, some of the more crazy aspects, like the whole idea of the Aryan race being superior over everybody else. I think that those basically were just implemented by those of the lower ranks. Is that a good
Mm.
way to put it? And it was just it was kind of tolerated. I don't, unless something like that nowadays is profitable.
Mm.
I don't think that there is an ideology along those lines, with the exception of, say, like a master race, slave race type
Mm.
of a situation, which basically, the entire planet is a slave race, to these people. If you want to go and look at it, like some researchers like Joseph Farrell. I kind of think that he's of the opinion that this breakaway civilization considers us all, black, white, red,
Mm.
yellow, whatever, as being a slave race to the secret breakaway civilization. But unless there is profitable mode to instigating, say like race wars or
Mm.
whatever, then it's not really it's not a philosophy. I guess
We
that's
see that in a culture war. We see they
right.
try to make Islamism, which we know, Nazism. Well, it was started
Yes.
by the British, but the Nazis were very quick to take over Islamic fundamentalism and push it in an even worse direction.
Yes.
So those wars in the Middle East and other places, Ukraine, they could be, remote by proxy, battles by different factions of influence by proxy.
Hmm?
As you say, to earn money, but if they're going to ruin places on Earth, they wouldn't want to take their own backyard. And
Exactly.
if they are integrated in our civilization, they do have family. I discussed this with Dolan. How much do they care about where the world is going? How much do they care about the environment, about values? And we were both ending at a tangent that we hope, at least, that they do recognize that our planet is special enough to be valued and that
Hmm.
they have some ties. Because Breakaway, in what sense? In a cultural sense, in an ethnical sense, in a technological sense, in a geographical sense?
Hmm.
you know so these are huge questions we have to entertain. And yeah, what's your take on it?
Well, I should point out, you talked about the fundamentalist, Islamic movement that has
Mm.
become really apparent nowadays. Werner von Braun, while he was still alive, when he was still here in the United States, we're talking about a guy, I mean, he was very high up in the Nazi chain of command.
Mm.
But after he was brought to the United States through Operation Paperclip, he said one time that there was going to be several scenarios that were going to be played out. One of them was the Cold War, and he said that would operate for a while until it became inefficient, and then there would be terrorism.
Mm.
And he said that and terrorism being instigated with Muslim fundamentalists. That was what he said. And then he said the third and final factor would be a Cold War with a fake extraterrestrial race.
Mm.
And I think that we are seeing this scenario being played out. We saw the Cold War, and now we are seeing the terrorist hot war with Islamic fundamentalists. And then after that plays out in 50, 75 years, then are we going to see like a false flag operation from this breakaway civilization? Like we've seen, in science fiction movies, where like, oh, you've got extra or like
Mars attacks.
yes, yes, yeah, exactly,
Mm.
exactly. Except that it's not actually the case. It's fake in order to kind of like bring everybody together under. And you've heard conspiracy theorists worry about this all the time under a war. Finally, a one world government under control by this breakaway civilization.
It's pretty scary to think that if they do have heavy weapons orbiting the planet, which can be pointed down to the planet as much as up to intruders, then this is indeed a prison planet, because it could explain why, if there's even more powerful forces out there or even more benevolent forces out there,
Mhm.
they would be kind of refrained from interfering too much, because there is this self-destruction system in place controlled by humans. I'd be more relieved if this was controlled by someone else than people on our planet, because someone else, not from this planet, coming here would have proved that they're able to survive their own collapse, so to speak. But we haven't been able to prove that we are not completely suicidal. On the contrary. So there is this prison planet system in place then. But how do you relate to the classical fundamentals question of non-terrestrials, meaning then not necessarily non-humans, because the human manifestation may be a template, it may be a cosmic kind of race.
Right.
But so let's not go into biological aspects, just if there is, people on Earth that controls this and cousins who comes from Earth that may be on the moon or Mars or Europe or wherever. I mean the moon Europe. And so could there be people who's not from our culture at all, our civilization at all, be that from another planet, another time, another dimension, and be that good guys or bad guys or neither of the above? But do you think, let's start with, are you open to the notion that they may be out there in addition?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we have seen throughout the history of mankind that there have been interactions with humanity and then some other outside influence, race, what have you. At one
Mm.
time we referred to them as angels or gods or
Or
demons.
ancients, have you
Yes,
also? Yeah. Mm.
right, exactly.
But there you have another faction then.
Hmm.
Then you can't say it's just two factions. Now we have three.
Right,
Because
yeah.
this is a point Dolan raises when he entertains the disclosure concept, when he entertains the breakaway civilization. He always gets back to that X factor too, and he even points to a fourth one, fourth in our calculations here. That will be us, the people, we the sheep, we the prize that they're fighting for. We have something to say here too, and thank God for internet. Otherwise, the two of us, wouldn't have this conversation at all.
That's right. That's right.
We would still be kooks that people came to in secret to ask about all this. So, yeah, to fulfill the circle. So, your take on this?
Well, I mean, yeah, I definitely feel that planet Earth is under the influence of outside sources. Like you said,
Mm.
at one time there seems to have been more of an apparent influence. Like I said, people used to believe in gods and demons and angels. Nowadays, it seems to be more subtle. But again, that could just be because of our own perceptions and belief systems and how we
Mm.
look at these types of interactions. John Keel used to call these things like mimics of man, that you had
Mm.
beings that superficially look like people that live amongst us, but
Wow.
they are not human, and that and he said
How
that
would he know? He was the one who was involved in Tesla-like technology, right?
John Keel.
Yeah.
No. John Keel was a writer from New York. He wrote like the Mothman prophecies.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
right. Okay,
I
okay.
mean, he did extensive research and a lot of field work,
Mm.
along these lines. And I mean, and I mean, he even claimed that, I mean, he would talk on the phone, with these things. They'd call him on the telephone, and
Yeah.
he'd have like long conversations, and or like these things, because a lot of them would claim to be like from another planet, that they
Yeah.
came here, and they would talk to people on Earth, and then the people would then contact Keel and say, well, this is what Gary from the planet Lanalos told me, and
Right.
and things like that.
So again, we're crossing this border into the metaphysical area.
Very much so, because I think that this non-human contact that humanity has been part of from the very beginning of time, has probably deliberately disguised itself so that we're never going to be sure of its origins. Heck,
Right.
it may not even be sure of its origins. The one thing that I always there've been these stories that in the 1950s that United States President Eisenhower and the Air Force actually had face-to-face contact with beings who came out of flying saucers, who
Yeah.
claimed that signed a treaty with them. These beings claimed to be, from like different planets outside of our solar system, and I think that initially we believe them, but somewhere along the lines, I think that the military and the government and then some of these, like maybe part of the breakaway civilization as well, found out that this information was not true.
Hmm.
That yes, we were dealing with non-human entities, but whatever information that they told us was probably a lie or disinformation, even that they weren't from, because early we were told, like, oh yeah, we're from Mars and Venus and Jupiter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's the ticket. But then once our technology got advanced enough that we were able to,
Yeah. These people got ridiculed when
yes,
we realized that this was bullshit.
right.
Mm.
But see, once we got, like satellites and stuff that were able to go up to these planets and we could tell, there's no people living there. Then these beings said, oh, no, 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 no. We're from Zeta Reticuli. That's,
Right.
500 light years away. Yeah. Come and get us now.
Yeah, and now we can, and they're probably not even from there. But then,
But
Tim,
to see the story always changes. So I
right.
mean, I think that we have had contacts with these things, whatever they are, but the stories that they have told us over the years cannot be taken at face value.
But then, Tim, it's unavoidable, and we should probably spend the rest of the what's left of the program on this question then, and that's that. I think I'm kind of going back and forth from that we are at war
Uh-huh.
because we have so stupid leaders, their values and everything, that they're so paranoid and fear-based that we're probably at war with these, I don't know, entities or whatever, or at least we believe we are. We
Mhm.
behave as we are.
Right.
We try to shoot at them and keep them away, and we have this potentially this carpet of destructive technology covering the Earth, and probably bases elsewhere too, like the Moon or Mars or Iapetus or wherever, or this Saturn's ring and all that Hoagland and others have uncovered. But this is scenario thinking, listeners. We have to tell them we know we are at the far side of anything here, but this is what's fun, right? So, but sometimes I'm more sympathetic to Stephen Greer's explanation that these people are actually peaceful because, if they have this ability, they could, I don't know what the prime direction is, that may stop them, but they have had the ability to appear themselves and make themselves known en masse, which they apparently don't do. They seem content, they seem to be agreeing that we shall be kept in the dark, and also they have had a technology, or the means is probably better to say, we don't even know how physical they are in their source, the means to wipe us out if they wanted to. If these were space monsters who were out to eat us, that would have happened by now.
Right.
And not to really make head spin here, but you should probably also, if you are familiar with it, get a little into the question of archons, because all this scenario you and me are painting here, all these inputs you're coming with are nothing new if you look at the story of the archons. Are you
Right.
familiar with that, the Gnostic?
Yes, I mean you're talking about, like, say, the Gnostic Gospels version of
Yes.
the Archons. Yes.
Or
Yes.
whatever version, but
Right.
you
Right.
see the parallels here, right?
Sure. Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
get a take on that before we wrap this up.
Well, okay. Now, when you refer to the archons, I mean, the idea of the archons are, you're talking about, say, like almost a supernatural type of demonic entity. I think that's how the Gnostics looked at it. Uh,
Yeah, with their paradigm,
right. Right.
non-technological paradigm. But
Right.
they were telling bullshit too. We shouldn't believe them. There are other myths out there too about creatures like this,
Hmm.
creatures who deliberately poisons our seed of knowledge, who wants to keep us ignorant or confused or whatever.
Well, there seems to be kind of like almost it's like they're giving us backhanded compliments because there seems to be a deliberate feeding of information to us
Right.
to help us advance as a race, and then at the same time they do something that kind of slaps us down a little bit.
Hmm.
you know because we see that humanity has they'll advance for a little while and then something will happen that will stop the advancement. We'll have like a dark age for a little bit,
Hmm.
and then we'll advance for a little while and then the same thing happens all over again. And I wonder if this isn't kind of like a deliberate scenario that has been developed over the billions of years when it comes to a higher civilization associating with a lower level civilization, because you can't just go and come to a planet that has an emerging intelligence and just suddenly throw all of the
No,
science
no.
and technology that you have at them, because they oh my God, can you imagine what the Earth would do if all of a sudden the spaceships appeared and they gave
Yeah.
us, I mean, the knowledge of the universe? Oh my God, we would kill each other.
Our heads would explode.
Oh
Yeah.
my, well, yeah, well, I mean, people would get a hold of that. We would kill each other in a matter of days,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a situation where, and it's like you said, I think that we are given kind of like little drips and drops of information to just to carry us on every 100 years or so, just slowly bringing us along. We get a little too uppity. Well, let's throw a meteor at a continent. And
Now we're into ancient astronauts hypothesis.
right, right. Well, or you could go and I mean, there could also be like spiritual
Yeah.
derailment. You don't have to go and throw a meteor at them. You go and give some, like a bogus spiritual information. Say like get a certain group all up in arms because they believe that God has talked to them and told them to go and kill everybody else. So I mean, you have several different scenarios that we have seen played out through history that would not surprise me if this was not deliberate, but all part of our advancement. And not only our advancement, but this may be something that has been done for other civilizations throughout the universe, or at
Mm.
least throughout the local universe for a long, long time.
Yeah, but then obviously we cannot conclude with anything else than that they, at the long run, are benevolent in their intentions.
Well, it's like ants asking whether or not we're benevolent, to them.
Well, if I am an ant farmer, I am to a certain not necessarily to the extent of making the ants having a good time,
Right.
but for the end goal of whatever the ant farm is for.
Well, look at a farmer who raises cattle.
Mm.
Okay, the farmer takes very good care of his cows. I mean,
Oh,
and
we're back to the prison planet. Oh
well,
my
yeah,
God.
but he loves his cows. He milks them, takes care of them, makes
Right.
sure that they're healthy, and then at a certain point he sends them out to the abattoir.
Yeah.
You know,
That's the one scenario.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So
But there could be different sources too. We have the classical like, black and white.
exactly.
That's been a theme that we've looked at in both part one and part two. You have this angels and demons perspective. So there may be good people because the occultists, most of the esoteric orders, I don't think I will vanish mysteriously by confessing in public that most esoteric orders have among their secret that there's a war in heaven, quote unquote.
Exactly.
But this is the old paradigm, and there may be ancestors of us around. I mean, you could turn around the ancient astronauts theory instead of saying that astronauts came from Sirius or wherever. That we are the one who, because we have stories going back to ancient times. Ancient China talked about how they colonized the moon.
Mhm.
By the way, literature that they published when it was forbidden in periods where they were forbidden to make up stories. They didn't have poetry and novels and stuff because in their culture for a period they had to have only factoid material. So that's one example, and there's a million. We don't have time to cover it all. So yeah, there could be that too, that we have our own people out there, and that's even earlier than the breakaway civilization you pointed at for
Right,
the
right.
19th century. The Nimsa.
And I love that scenario, by the way. I mean, I have looked into that one myself.
Oh my God! Then it ties into the whole of Earth.
Right, right.
But that we should have a separate orgy for. Yeah, we need you back for that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, the books that you have so many books, but let's mention the books that ties into what we've talked about today. Let's start about Tesla. You have one book on Tesla, right? Or two?
Well, I probably my best-selling Tesla book is called The Lost Journals of Nikola Tesla.
And the subtitle?
It's had a couple of subtitles with different printings. Its original subtitle was, let's see, The Lost Journals of Nikola Tesla. Let's see, HARP, Chemtrails, and The Secret of Alternative 4.
Yeah.
But then see we did a reprinting of it where I added new information, and then it was like HARP time travel and
But Alternative 4, I thought it was called Alternative 3.
It is Alternative 3, but there was a fourth alternative.
Is it possible to very quickly hint at what that was?
Yeah. Well, the whole part of Alternative 4 was the idea that, okay, well, alternative...
Yeah, we know about 1, 2, 3 people have talked about it.
Okay, the Alternative 4 would be to, rather than leaving the planet, that we would try to use weather modification to stop global warming.
Right.
And that was what the whole HARP and chemtrail situation was, that this was an attempt to halt global warming, using these, basically primitive means.
I'm an agnostic to the chemtrail question, but there is, I think it was the movies What in the Earth Are They Spying or Why in the Earth Are They Spying, that it is out there now. It is mainstream verifiable information that there are plans to try to cover, try to reflect, because as the globe warms up and the polar caps melts, less sunlight is reflected, and that accelerates the heat. So it's so logical that these idiots who think that they are trying to kill people, mass genocide, that's the intention. That's typical disinformation.
It is.
If it was deliberate, it would be to reflect sunlight so as to have an artificial version of the relief of the melting polar caps. And that's how arrogant and stupid we are to interfere with nature. This is Frankenstein all over again.
It is.
So yeah, and it is out there. Scientists, I'm not saying it has happened, but the plans, the ideas, the projects are in the work, so to speak. So who knows where it goes. So okay, thank you for telling us about that. Of course, Tesla probably pops up in many of your books, but you have at least one more devoted to him.
Oh, I have so well. Okay, the other one that we referred to was the Secret Space Program. Who is responsible? And this actually was an updating of an earlier book that I had written, a number of years ago, called Nikola Tesla: Journey to Mars.
Ah, okay.
Right.
And the subtitle here is the...
okay. I'm sorry. It's the Secret Space Program. Who is responsible? Tesla, the Nazis, NASA, or a breakaway civilization?
Yes, that's a good appetizer right there.
But that is, those two are just a couple of the many books that I have.
Yeah, let's turn to the time travel books, because I think they would be relevant to much of what we talked about today.
Mm-hmm. Well, the most recent one is called Time Travel: Fact Not Fiction. It's time slips, real-time machines, and how to experiments to move forward or backwards through time. And then actual cases of people who have traveled through time and space. And then the original one, the first one that I co-wrote with another author by the name of Commander X, is called Time Travel: A How-To Insider's Guide.
Who's this Commander X chap?
Well, Commander X was one of Timothy Green Beckley's earlier writers, and Tim Beckley is the gentleman who has Global Communications Publishing, who publishes all of my books.
Mm-hmm.
And so Commander X, gosh, I mean, he wrote for, and Commander X supposedly is a retired military intelligence official.
You haven't met him?
You know, I have collaborated with him. I have worked through mail and email, but never face to face. Nope.
Interesting.
And that's the way he likes it.
So he could be seeding information out there then.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
You could be a tool too.
Yeah. My wife calls me a tool all the time.
Well, every husband is to her own.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. But you have a book about teleportation, I see.
Yes, it's called Teleportation: How to Guide from Star Trek to Tesla. And this that one deals. I mean, it goes all over the place from like the current understanding of quantum physics and how teleportation could work to things like poltergeist activity, which shows definite teleportation of physical objects.
Yeah, that's dimensional phenomena.
Right.
You have a book called Men of Mystery, subtitled.
I can never remember the subtitles of my own books here. Yeah.
Okay, I'll help you out. I have it in front of me. It's Nikola Tesla and Otis T. Carr, Weird Inventions of the Strangest Men Who Ever Lived.
That's right. And that is a fascinating book, and I wish that more people would read this one because I mean there is just so much excellent information, especially when it deals with Otis T. Carr, who was a gentleman who in the 1960s started to build his own flying saucer based on Tesla technology and came really close to actually making it happen. And then, like weird, mysterious stuff happened with him that kind of shot him down. It's just a really interesting kind of like a look at history and how, like outsiders, when they try to develop like new ideas with especially not teleportation, but off the wall propulsion systems and things like that, how they're treated.
And then you have the book Secret Black Projects of the New World Order. That kind of ties in here too, doesn't it?
Yeah, that one was actually the first book that I ever wrote for Tim Beckley's Global Communications, and I will have to admit that now he came up with the title to put in the New World Order because at the time that this book came,
he wanted to milk that association.
He really did because at that time that was really a hot subject.
That was the fad. Yeah.
But the Secret Black Projects of the New World Order deals a lot with this whole exotic aircraft technology.
Yeah, the subtitles gives more away, and that is anti-gravity UFOs, black helicopters, and mysterious flying triangles.
Right, because the whole Area 51 meme was just coming out at that time, and so I mean because I seriously doubted that they actually had crashed flying saucers there at Area 51. But and my whole idea was that this was the place that they were testing exotic technology aircraft. Anti-gravity and what have you. The black triangles were probably coming out of that area at that time.
And then you have the book Pioneers of Space, the long-lost book of George Adamski, A Trip to Moon, Mars and Venus. We have mentioned Adamski earlier, and of course he was some kind of crook, but it doesn't mean that there are interesting aspects to his stories. Some have also tied it into Nazi.
Yeah, I was the editor of that book. And Pioneers of Space was a science fiction story that George Adamski wrote in the 1940s before his alleged UFO contacts. And this
interesting. Interesting.
This had been a lost manuscript for a number of years. And Timothy Green Beckley happened to find somebody who had this, and so he was able to get a hold of it and reprint it. But up until, I mean, oh my gosh, like I said, this was written probably 1946, something like that,
Mm.
even before the whole UFO phenomena,
Mm.
started. And it's very interesting because a lot of the stuff that Adamski wrote in Pioneers of Space,
Yeah.
it's the very same kind of scenarios that he came up with when he claimed to have had contact with the space.
You know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of Ron Hubbard and also what's the founder of Mormonism called?
Oh, Joseph Smith.
Yeah, he reminds me of. He seems to be some kind of weird mix between Joseph Smith and Hubbard because he pulls a Joseph Smith all the time. Oh, I just experienced this. I just experienced that. But you can't be close to me when it happens, like Moses on the mountain, right? It's in secret all the time. And the Hubbard thing is that first we write about it. Oh shit, I can't earn any money as a decent writer. Let's turn it into reality.
Yeah, I tell you
Wow.
something. I think George Adamski would have loved to have had the money that L. Ron Hubbard ended up getting from his whole,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
his religious take on science fiction.
Mm.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's very it's very similar, and I think Adamski was smart enough to try to take these earlier works that he did and then
Mm.
attach them to the growing flying saucer movement that occurred just a few years later.
Right. Mm. Okay. I don't think we'll touch on other of your books because we'll get back to them when we discuss the topics related to them. But you have a good few books out there. How long time have you actually been producing these things?
Let's see. I have been writing books since probably I think 1996, 97 is when I first started. But I had been writing articles for like UFO magazines and things
Mm.
like that before that. I mean, I helped put myself through college, in the late 1970s by writing articles for Saga's UFO magazine.
Oh, so when you worked in mainstream television, that was parallel with your
Once
dabbling in this.
once I got well, see, I mean, I always had done research and stuff like that when I was working in mainstream television. I just wasn't doing any writing because I just never had time for it. And it wasn't until I kind of retired from television, except on a freelance basis, that
Mm.
I started actually putting out the books because I had the time for it. I mean, when you work in television, and I mean, I traveled all over the world, so I mean, it's kind of
Mm.
difficult to sit down in front of a then typewriter to write about this stuff when you're on a jet plane all the time.
Yeah, sure, sure. Well, this has been so interesting, Tim. I really look forward to our next seance. So thanks a lot for coming on.
Well, thank you very much, Al. I had a great time tonight, and I hope your audience learned something and enjoyed it as well.
Mm. Yeah, me too, for sure. And that concludes our conversation with Tim Swartz. Before closing up, I'd like to express a few sentiments about the status of the forum. First off, we have to express our heartfelt appreciation of the overwhelming feedback we've received so far. We're really quite surprised about how well these programs are perceived. We seriously had no idea before we started that it would resonate with so many of you. And not just that, but you, our listeners, also seem to be above average in, how should I put this, brightness. Because we got so much thoughtful feedback. And moreover, so many people willing to help out. So let me take the opportunity to give a shout out to our 2 new team members. Blue Green, who's now pumping up the YouTube clips. If you think they become more classy lately, that's due to him as a professional videographer, spending his free time, like the rest of us, devoting it to improve the experience for the audience. And our latest addition to the team is HG, who's quite the detective and tracks down the most obscure email addresses and gets through to the highest ivory tower guests in order for us to reach those we seek to book. Remember, getting hold of them isn't always enough. They also need to see that you, the listeners, wants them to get the forum treatment. That coming on this program for a calm, in-depth conversation is something to be desired. And of course, the rest of the team also contribute with their efforts, and even if many of you seem to enjoy my interview style, despite the fact that I'm a naive amateur, I alone do not manifest these programs. The most important factor, of course, apart from the generous guests who donate their time to speak with us, is you folks, by contributing in whatever way you can, including just listening and sharing the programs and spreading the word. Those of you who can afford to spend a few cents through donations have really eased our costs, and we're now starting to think that this fresh breeze from north, that this borealis approach may just be something that will stick around for a while. 1/3 of our production costs are now reduced, so it's going the right way. So thanks a lot for chipping in. Let's hope we manage to keep this interesting and worthwhile for everyone. Check in next time to see for yourself when we're following this track of Breakaway Bandits further. Until then, together with the full Borealis team, I sincerely remain your host, Al. Be seeing you.
Who is number 1?